Hi, this is Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader. I'm here today to do a Friday Reads to wrap up the last half of December, the books that I read. My plan for the video is to do a mini book haul of books that I received for Christmas, and then I want to talk about and reflect on my Remember December challenge, which was a group read where booktubers were kind of taking some time in December to reread favorite books and see if they meant as much as they had remembered or if they got something new from the experience. And I thought this was probably my favorite group theme for BookTube all year round. And it makes me really want to continue the spirit of rereading throughout the next year. So after I do that reflection, I want to talk a little bit about what I'm reading now and then what I plan to read in January. So got a big agenda for this little video, and I really hope you had very happy holidays if you celebrate, and the new year brings joy and peace and calm and relief from some of the crazy things that happened this year. So those are my wishes, and let's just go ahead and get started. That was a long preamble for what I want to do. But first of all, I'll do a mini book haul of books that I received for Christmas. The first book that I have here is called The Change of Climate. It's an early novel by Hilary Mantel. This book came out in 1994, and from reading the back, I can tell you that it's about a couple who were missionaries in Africa. Something bad traumatizes them while they are in Africa, and they come back never to speak of it again, and then the aftermath. So to me, that sounds quite interesting. I know that Hilary Mantel and her husband lived for quite some time in Saudi Arabia for his job, and she has written some essays and some short fiction based on that experience. Next, I have Ghosts. These are ghost stories by Edith Wharton. I think I saw quite a few people reading that this year. This is an NYRB classic, one of my all-time favorite formats of books. These matte covers are just so creamy and delicious and lovely, and I love the kind of X-ray flower motif of the cover, and so I am really interested in reading this. I think I saw Lindy from Lindy's Magpie Reads talk about this book. This is My Brilliant Friend. This is the first book in the quartet of books about two friends who grow up in post-war Italy, and this is the graphic novel version of this. And I remember, just look at those blues. Blue is my favorite color. And that is so moody and gorgeous. I can't wait to read this. This book is Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein. I've seen a lot of people talk about this. It was either long or shortlisted for the Booker Prize. It for sure was longlisted. I don't know for sure if it made it to the shortlist. I wasn't following that closely. But again, another really beautiful hardcover, and I love the cover. I think they did a beautiful, this is cover design that I really like. And finally, I got the Iliad, translated by Emily Wilson from Homer. And I have the Odyssey that's like the companion, and so these are going to look beautiful on the shelf together. But more than that, I really would like to read this. When I was in college, and I think, I went to college late, so this is when I was in my early 30s, I took a class on Homer, and all we did is read the Iliad and the Odyssey in that class. And so I think we read the Richard Lattimore translations, and so I would love to re-experience these two classic novels, but with a new translation. So I just love how beautiful this is. It just gorgeous. Here are my reflections on Remember December. I read the Old Filth Trilogy by Jane Gardam, and this consists of 3 books about the same group of characters. There is Edward Feathers, who has a nickname of Old Filth, who, because he tried to become a barrister in London after World War II and was unable to kind of get any foothold there. And so he had a very good friend who told him he should try being a barrister in Hong Kong. So that stands for failed in London, try Hong Kong. And so he does, and he has a brilliant legal career in Hong Kong. And there he met his wife, Betty, and and he has a frenemy named Terry. And anyway, there's this like circle of friends, but Old Filth is almost all about Edward, and it is about his whole life essentially. His father was greatly traumatized by World War I and is some kind of a British functionary in Singapore. And so that is in Malaysia. And that is where Edward is born. His mother dies in childbirth. And so he is sent away to Scotland to go to school. And so one critique from all of these books is the fact that they had all of these British dignitaries in all these colonies across the world for ruling the empire of the lands that they conquered and the lands that they are taking all of the natural resources from. But they didn't want their children there. And so they would send their children back to Europe, back to London or back to Scotland or Wales. And that's so it's a critique of that, because they essentially grew up without their parents, and they're called Raj orphans. Either their parents died or they just had very little contact with their parents as they were growing up. And all of the people in all three of these books had similar situations. They were expected to kind of uphold the upper crust, and their parents are in service to the crown, and they're not supposed to complain about it. They are supposed to be, the upper crust, the privileged people, and they are not allowed to have trauma, or they're at least not allowed to really talk about it or even acknowledge it in themselves. And so that is one major theme in all three books. I have read this first book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I think I've read it maybe 4 times now. I had read the second book once and had really forgotten all about anything that happened in it. And then I had never read the third book. So this time around, I read all three, one right after the other. And so to me, it was almost like one big novel instead of 3 smaller novels. And I really got to know these characters very well. And there were little secrets that were revealed in the second and third book that you didn't know anything about in the first book. And so it was very satisfying to wrap up the entire circle, as all of these characters are dying off of old age by the third book. So that's not really a spoiler, because the third book is called Old Friends and the second book is called The Man in the Wooden Hat, which really was just one tiny little revelation near the end of the book, what that means. So anyway, I'm really glad I read these 3 books, and I'm really glad I read them all together. I have as much affection for the first book as ever. I don't know that I would reread all 3 again. I honestly don't know if I need to reread any of them for a very long time, because I was so immersed in this story. I would recommend them to a certain kind of reader. I think you probably know whether or not you are that type of reader, and it was satisfying. The other book I read for Remember December was Swann by Carol Shields. I remembered almost essentially nothing about this book, but it turned out to be quite delightful for the most part. It took a turn at the end that I did not care for, but it's about the literary mythology that arises from the discovery of a chapbook of poetry written by a woman in Ontario who was a farmer's wife, and she had no friends, she had no contacts other than with the librarian when she was allowed to check out 2 books a week by her husband. He was monitoring what she was reading. He was a brute and tyrannical, and he murders her. He ends up murdering her. So this young scholar who's in her 20s but seems much older than her years kind of discovers this chapbook and starts writing about and investigating this poet named Mary Swann. And all of this literary scholarship arises. And so this book, Swann, the first part of it is 4 different characters, all of whom have vested interest in the scholarship of this poet who has only written 1 book of poetry. And so it's her publisher, it's this character Sarah, who is the scholar, and it's a biographer who has written a biography of he had written a biography of Ezra Pound and of someone named Starman, which I don't know if that was a real poet or not. But anyway, and he's trying to write a biography of Mary Swann, but there is like nothing to go by. There's nothing. She is like a cipher. She is a ghost. She is mysterious, and there's really nothing to say about her. But he is desperately trying to wrangle up some information to write a biography. So each of these 4 characters interact with each other via letters, and each gets their own section of the book, and so you get to know the characters. It's a satire, so it's written in almost a comic form, and I really enjoyed that portion of the book. However, at the end of the book, the last 25%, this threw me for a loop. We find out that we are reading a screenplay at the end about the symposium where all of these characters are coming together to talk about Mary Swann and pool their resources and, create and have a whole symposium about her. But it says right at the beginning of the screenplay that all of these are fictional characters and this is just the screenplay. And then the way that and then it's all the dialogue of the characters, and they seem so less formulated, and the dialogue was so stilted, and it completely changed for me my perception of the book. It's like often when you go into a book reading it, you take it at face value that these characters are real in the world of the novel. Like you have to suspend disbelief on any book you're reading, right? Because we know that all the characters are fictional, but you kind of expect that you have been given entryway into another world, and for the time being that you are reading these pages, you are part of that world, and you kind of forget, in a sense, that these are fictional characters. But then what Carol Shields does with this screenplay edition at the end is it throws it all out of balance for me, because it's like, well, why do I care about this if in the world of this novel, which is narrative and then screenplay, these characters aren't real? And then it feels like we're just going through the motions in a sense, and it loses some of the connectivity that I felt with the actual characters that I was reading about. So if that makes any sense, I feel like I'm nitpicking here, but it didn't work for me at all at the end. But the first 3/4 of the book I actually really loved, because I loved getting to know the characters and how silly they sometimes were, and thinking about the ego of poets and the egos of writers and publishers. And so I don't know that I'd recommend this book. It certainly didn't have the satisfaction that I got from reading other Carol Shields novels. Now I would like to reread more of them that I have read, because I want to see more about my old self reading them and my new self reading them. So in that sense, Reread December really did what it was set out to do. It made me reevaluate what I had read in the past and how little of it that I retained, and then a reevaluation of how I read it as a person who's many decades older now. So, okay, that was a lot. I'm sorry. That was a lot. All right, so those are my reflections. The other thing I wanted to do for Remember December was to reread Pale Fire, and then talk to you about that and show you this version I have of the poetry. But I didn't get a chance to do that. I started reading it, but then these other books really took up most of my time, and so that is on hold, but it's still a project I would like to pursue in 2024. And what am I reading now? I am reading this gorgeous book called The Feast by Margaret Kennedy. This was written in 1950, originally published, and then McNally Editions put it out as a reissue this year. And so this is a gorgeous cover. It has French flaps, beautiful typography. Love it. It's gorgeous. Just look how pretty that is, that flap. The back flap, so pretty. This is a really neat series. Anyway, I think I heard about this on the Mooks and the Gripes podcast, and so far what it's about, it's kind of a comic novel too, the prologue tells us that we are going to be meeting characters, some of whom are dead, but we don't know which ones, because there is a house. It's a guest house, a boarding house, kind of like a little boutique hotel where tourists come, and the cliff wall has fallen and crushed the house. So we know some people in the house died and some people lived. And then as it gets into the novel in chapter 1, past the prologue, we see that it's an epistolary novel. It's letters and diary entries and thoughts of all these different characters who may or may not have been killed in the landslide. So the characters are very funny. Some of them are finicky. They have a lot of unrealistic expectations, the guests do, and I'm loving it. So I don't know anything about Margaret Kennedy and if she's written other books, but I really like the style of this. And I'm doing a buddy read with Shawn the Book Maniac. We are reading all of Edna O'Brien's novels in publication order. This one's called Night. It was written in, I think, 1972. And I know very little about it so far, but, it's Edna O'Brien, and I'm there for it. So I will talk more about this once we've read the book. It's very short, and we're reading half this week and half the following week. Okay, what am I doing in January? What am I planning to read in January? Okay. I will be starting a buddy read of the Best American Short Stories of 2023, edited by Min-Jin Lee, with Teresa, my friend, and she's a BookTube commenter that you've probably seen pop up in many comment sections. And this is, I think, our third or fourth, I'm not sure, maybe third year of reading Best American Short Stories together. So we read typically 2 a week until we're done, and we talk about the stories and our impressions of them. And so I really love doing that, and I'm looking forward to it. And for one of my book club picks, we're reading The Rachel Incident by Carolyn O'Donoghue, which is an Irish novel written about millennials in the financial crash in Ireland in 2008. And it was on a lot of people's best of books of this year, and it looks delightful to me, and looking forward to that. I think I'll pick up Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein and the Elena Ferrante graphic novel of My Brilliant Friend. And those are my plans so far. I'm hoping to get more reading done this year. I don't have a set goal, but I just want to read more of the books I have and just enjoy what I have, enjoy being a book lover and enjoy being a reader. So thank you so much for watching, and please look for my upcoming videos, which will be out in the next few days. And I hope you enjoy the last little remnants of 2023, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.